on, you bastard!
Brought to you by supporters who probably have better taste than this schmuck.
Fun Publications is in a very weird spot. Its figures go for crazy money. However, not all of them hit the mark. Many of them just kind of fall flat. If you actually think about it, a lot of it makes sense. They're given certain molds from a certain year and they just kind of have to figure out what to do with them. As a result, they sort of have their hands tied, but they sort of don't. They have a much higher paint budget and they can do whatever they want, but by the same token, the molds they use, they have to use those molds. Sometimes that gives us figures that just do not hit the mark. Sometimes those figures just fail miserably. But sometimes that gives us some really interesting pieces of the franchise. Sometimes you find something you normally wouldn't. And within that, you can find hidden brilliance. Will you necessarily? Well, I don't know. You really have to take a look. One thing you'll notice right away with Fun Publications figures is that they go absolutely ham on the paint. It doesn't matter which version you're getting, regardless of what you grab, they are going to fill it with paint completely. Is that enough to justify their absurd aftermarket prices? Not really. But for what I got this for, which was about $40, I'm not really complaining. Double the price of a core class figure for a rare and obscure Fun Publications figure, yeah, it's fine. Of course, I'm gonna be real with you, I think the way that they're releasing figures now, just at retail and selects, I think that's a lot better. But still, this is done very well. They've got the nice, crisp Predacon symbol, and they've got a lot of paint around the bonnet. The grey is reasonable, and the silver windows, they really work. Silver's a very underutilized color, I find, when it comes to window painting. I feel they should be using it a lot more on figures, but instead it's that bloody baby blue. Ugh. Now, unfortunately, the red and yellow paint is a little bit wispy. Given the difficulty of the color, I kind of get it. But it is something that I have noticed with this particular figure. The yellow less so, but especially the red. It doesn't look that great. It feels like it could have used another coat. One or two anyway. But it's still done reasonably well. It's not the worst I've ever seen, even if there's a bit of overspray on the guns. I think it would have been nice if these guns were removable, but I kind of get why they're not. This is based on Scamper, the pack-in for Metroplex, and the fact that they were able to split it off at all is pretty commendable, given that sprues and stuff are very weird to work with, often gang molded, and this one I guess it wasn't. I love the red wheels, even if the red plastic does look a bit cheap and unpainted. It's just a really nice visual quirk that I think really adds to the figure overall. And this kind of unfinished spoiler back here is a really nice thing too. Would have been nice if it was filled in, but I still like it. I only really have one gripe with this mode, and it's these sections at the front. Because of the way it transforms, they've tried to make these engines on the side, but they're done in grey and it looks really cheap and unpainted. It is unpaintable plastic, so I get why they couldn't add anything to it, but I feel they should have chosen a slightly darker shade. Or lighter in that matter. Just go lighter or go darker. This weird middle ground. I mean, it is Games Workshop grey. This is classic Games Workshop grey right there. I guess I finally have an example of that. Also would have been nice if they could have painted the front section. There's a lot of unpainted details there. I know I can go in and paint it myself, but given the rarity of this figure, not great. Also, this doesn't really peg in. This is a bit loose, but, you know, still pretty decent. Got a few janky areas, but I can't hate this too much. Anywho, size-wise, he is 7.6 centimeters by 4.5 by 2.1. And for comparisons, here he is next to a standard Legion figure, showing that he's really small for core Legend size. I mean, just look at how Skywarp dwarfs him. But that aside, standard modern Micromaster, standard modern Minicon, not so standard Lego minifigure, and Crumbs. Also, I forgot to mention earlier, but he does have weapon storage. Just sits there, but it looks very silly. So I will leave that for now. Come on, off you get. Transformation is very simple, even for a core / Legion class figure. It was originally a pack-in accessory for a Titan class though, so I do kinda get it. But still, it's something you can flip back and forth very quickly. Untab the arms from there, untab the legs and bring them down, come around to the bottom and bring out the waist section. The torso folds over and pegs into place. Separate the legs. Arms rotate. And that's really it. It is very simple. There is not a lot that it actually does. And that's fine for some figures. Not every figure needs a billion steps. In robot mode, I'm not sure this really looks that much like Scorponok. I mean, the colors are there, but design-wise, it is a pretty big departure. It's basically the Scorponok colors draped over the Scamper mold, but I think it really works as its own thing. Pretty much most of the details come across from the vehicle mode, you know, the grey on the chest, the yellow on the legs. Even the wheels come across because of the way they're pinned in. I think that's a really nice quirk of the mold, and I really like the way it comes through. Everything else, though, is basically just the grey, unpaintable plastic, but it looks a lot less annoying here, simply because of the way it works out. It is a very nice looking figure. Now, there are way nicer looking Fun Publications figures, but this is a pretty good one. It's not one of the ones where you just look at it and wonder, why did they do that? Which, you know, I appreciate. Not all Fun Publications figures turn out very well. The back is reasonably clean. I mean, you've got hollow legs, but everything else works very well. It is a stock standard G1 transformation. It's basically pretty close to a Countach anyway, although I don't go crazy over it like I do with most Countaches. Articulation is also pretty simple. Technically, it's supposed to have a ball-jointed head, but it doesn't actually work because you can't get your fingers in there, so really you just get forward and back. Ball-jointed shoulders, ball-jointed elbows, ball-jointed hips, and ball-jointed knees, so you get everything you could really want. I'm gonna be real, a lot of the fun with this figure comes down to the fact that it's a weird and wacky and obscure, and I guess in some cases expensive kind of figure. I mean, it wasn't that expensive for me. I got very lucky during the COVID-19 pandemic, but for a lot of people who really want this, you're probably not gonna have the luck I have, which is unfortunate. Honestly, if every Fun Publications figure could be retail price off the shelf, I would easily take that in a heartbeat. Rare and obscure figures should be affordable, not rare and obscure and expensive. But unfortunately, that's just how the market works. The gun is fine, I suppose. I mean, it doesn't really do much. Just sort of sits in his hand or just sort of stores in the back like it would in vehicle mode. But you know, it is what it is. I guess those little pylons sculpted in there are rather nice. It's a nice little feature of the original mold. Not the craziest detail, but I really like it. Most of the detail just comes from the new face sculpt paint, which, you know, works really well, and the way the wheels work, but you know, it's just a nice little fun Legends figure. And I know for a lot of people, that's not the draw of Fun Publications. They want the perfect paint sculpt and the obscurity and everything is amazing. And this figure isn't going to give you that. But if you're that into it, well, go for it. And if you see it on the cheap, absolutely go for it. Some Fun Publications figures just come on the cheap, and this was one of those for me. Anywho, size-wise, he is about 5.5 centimeters by 8.8 centimeters, so he's going the doubles in both decimal points. And for comparisons, here he is next to a standard Legion figure, a standard Core class figure, so again, he's really small for a Legend/Core figure, a standard modern Micromaster, a standard modern Minicon, a not-so-standard LEGO minifigure, and Crumbs. I'm not going to pretend that Scorponok is one of the best Fun Pub releases to ever exist. I'm glad to have him, but really I'd only have him because he's opportunistic. For 40 bucks, yeah, I'm going to say yes to a BotCon figure. Why wouldn't I? Especially since I wanted a version of the Scamper mold without buying the full Metroplex. This is a good way to get that, but it is quite opportunistic. As a vehicle mode, Scorponok, it's just okay. If you want to get into Fun Pub, there are much better figures to get. Granted, those figures are way more expensive thanks to the aftermarket, but they are there. Honestly though, I probably wouldn't bother getting into Fun Publications these days. If you're not that into it, you can just get the modern stuff. For as expensive as mainline is on the aftermarket, Fun Pub is a whole other story. Try 150 for one deluxe. It's f***ing absurd, and if you're in the position like myself to get something Fun Pub for cheap, I'd absolutely go for it, but to hunt this specific figure down, it's not that necessary. Really, it's up to you whether you like this one or not. I just have a passing interest and I'm glad to have it, but you may be way more into it than I am. And if you're way more into it, it does deliver on what it says on the box. There's nothing in it that'll really annoy you. But for my money, it's just decent. It's not amazing, it's not terrible, it's just decent. But let's not talk about something decent next. Let's talk about something that I personally find truly heinous. Maybe I'm alone in this one. Maybe I'm just crazy. Crazy, I was crazy once I locked in the room, rubber room with rats, yada yada yada. But I do want to say this. So in that case, see you tomorrow.